Hey everyone, welcome to this MTZ Insiders Update. In this video, we're going to talk about the last 3 months of 2020, what's going on collectively, but geared towards more of a personal development standpoint. So looking at a lot of the changes we've had here in 2020, we can see that these last few months is really going to be a completion of a lot of the energy we've been experiencing here this year. We can see that because a lot of the aspects we've had since the beginning of the year are starting to stagger out and complete as we get closer to 21. We also have some conjunctions at the very end of the year with Jupiter and Saturn suggesting new beginnings, as well as with an eclipse in December suggesting a new beginning going into the new year. We also do see here that October, November, December has a little bit more forward-moving energy, kind of in a staggered sense. The outer planets of Jupiter and Saturn will be direct going into October, which can be some good implementation. But I would say most importantly is that on November 14th, Mars will go direct. And this has been a lot of maybe uncertainty about where we're putting our action and energy, having to go more with the flow, which will still be good until January, but we could notice a little bit of forward-moving energy with our drives, motivation, assertive self, things of that nature. All right, so we'll look at this as well as just a general look at the outer planets to see what's going on in the big picture. We'll start to funnel it into October, November, and December and tie it into going into 21. All right, so let's take a look at all this here in more detail when we return. All right, so here's the chart. We're going to look at this for each month. First, we're going to look at the big picture, though. We're going to take a look at some of the outer planets. I've been getting a lot of questions about, what's going on with the outer planets because we don't talk about those too much in the weekly forecast. And by the way, for those of you who don't know, I do also do weeklies, which you can find on the website. They're not sent out in this newsletter because it would be every week. But you can always go to masteringthezodiac.com, and under the weekly horoscopes, you can see the week by week. But yeah, hopefully this video will give a more bigger picture look at the time period. All right, and and of course, we are using the actual size of the constellations. So if you are new to MTZ Insiders, definitely check out the website as well, masteringthezodiac.com. There you'll find information as to the type of astrology we're using because it is different from mainstream. Basically, we are using the visible sky and the actual size of the constellations, which changes the signs quite drastically from mainstream astrology. All right, so let's do a sort of overview of where the outer planets are collectively. So coming into October, we do have Saturn and Jupiter now direct. And this has been playing a very large role in the collective energies. With Saturn next to Pluto, this is a lot of the restructuring that we've been seeing collectively and with the world and with governments, which is Saturn. But in our personal lives, this has been really good to restructure things this year. Build new foundations. Let some past foundations go, some ones that are maybe more unstable or things that are no longer serving us, that we do want to build these fresh new foundations with. So coming into October, now that Saturn and Jupiter are direct, it's more of this implementation of this, right? New foundations, new things to build towards our long-term perspective, especially if there's anything that we are inspired about. This year has been about really building upon any type of things we're spirited about, anything we're seeing as a potential, as an opportunity, maybe a bit of adventurous things, right? It's been a really good year of grounding and implementing these kinds of visions, these kinds of inspirations and potentials. All right, so some forward moving momentum there going into October. Looking at some of the more outer planets, Uranus is still going to be retrograde for the remainder of this year and into early 2021. But, just generally the next couple years, at least few years, it will be good to still, really take initiative with things that we feel like is going to be a greater reflection of our true self. Uranus, the constellation is all about innovation and it's all about experimenting and trying new things. And this is in Aries, which is about ourselves. What are our needs? What are our desires? Right? How can we take action and initiative to induce healthy change in our life so our life does reflect a greater sense of our true self? So that's a little bit more an internalized process for these few months. But nonetheless, like I said, the next few years, still really good to have some of this, revolutionary experimentation energy with what it is we want and our independence and our autonomy in our lives. All right, and Neptune is going to be finishing up Aquarius for about the past 10 years. There's been a lot of uncertainty about the future and collective matters. You know, Aquarius is about the future. It is about these collective matters, and we all know Neptune blurs the lines. It can create that uncertainty about it. But Neptune is going to be finishing and starting to go into Pisces around March of 2021. So with this, I think the whole idea with Neptune and Aquarius has been to develop a more receptive approach to the future, that we don't always need to know exactly where things are going in terms of the future and in terms of these kind of aspirations. We can be a little more receptive about it and see how everything ends up kind of working out and happens in this divine timing kind of sense. So I'd say great to still do that, but I would expect March onward of next year to be a little bit clearer in terms of all things Aquarius, the future, the world, collective matters, our future aspirations, right? These kinds of things. All right, so that's the outer ones. And of course, Pluto we talked about with the restructuring, and he'll be in Sagittarius for about the next 4 or 5 years. All right, so let's take a look now at a deep dive into October, November, and December, separating them, looking at them specifically. So starting with October, we do have a transit that is completing, and it's been going on since February 20th, and it is a more opportunity kind of transit that we can choose to use or not use. It's the sextile between Jupiter and Neptune, right? And sextiles are openings, just a potential. And in this sense, if there has been anything that you have been inspired about or seeing as something that is a dream or ideal of some kind that you've wanted to maybe put some energy towards or cultivate in some way. And if that started to come in since, if you can think back to February 20th, around there, this could be a completion of that energy. It's the last contact with this transit. And this will be on October 12th, so a whole part of middle October. Good to finalize anything here, perhaps. Now, if there hasn't been anything specifically, then I think it's still good to do that, though. It's a great time of seeing what our ideals are, again, about the future. And to put some energy towards those, to open our mind, open our perception to these things that we can again start to implement with now Jupiter and Saturn and even Pluto in October going direct. All right, so that'll be October 12th time period in that middle part of the month. The other very important thing with October is that on October 13th, just after that, Mercury is going to go retrograde right at the tail end of Virgo. So, this whole month of October, it's still really good to be focused on improvement. If there's anything that involves, kind of building good habits, good routines, things that require maybe personal development or work or day-to-day activities that we can improve and refine upon, this is a great way of working with the month in general. Now, with this, we do have a T-square in orb for October, which means that it's, first of all, important to balance things out with these more, habitual working kind of energy with more receptive energy, right? To balance it out with more receptive energy. And that's been quite challenging collectively, generally speaking, to do because it's Mars and Pisces here. This has been the past few months of really having to turn inward to see what it is that is going to lead to more peace in our life and more spiritual fulfillment, and to put energy towards those things. So instead of fighting the current, instead of trying to push too hard against the stream, Mars in Pisces has been helping us feel the current and to swim with it, to certainly take action. And with Mars retrograde, to experiment with new things we enjoy, new things we want to take action with and, take initiative with, but in such a way that we're willing to ebb and flow. Because Mars in Pisces reminds us that there's this greater cosmic plan, if you will, or there's all these things outside of our control. That's so important for us to be receptive to that process. So with this T-square, it's important to find that balance between doing and being, work and rest, doing things important on a physical level, but also on a spiritual level. And maybe going back with Mars retrograde until he'll be retrograde until November 14th, going back and kind of turning inward to see what it is that will lead to more peace and receptive action here in our life, and yeah, what's more important on a spiritual level. All right, but this is a T-square with the outer planets, so it could be a little bit challenging to incorporate. How can we still expand our horizons, build these potentials, this restructuring we've been doing this year, while being receptive and doing our best to go with the flow, and doing our best to, build good habits and good routines. So I was talking about the Mercury retrograde. Again, that'll start October 13th. It'll go on for the rest of October. So the second half, basically, until November 4th. And this has to do with basically things that have maybe started since around September 23rd, just last month, that we were working towards, we were improving or taking care of. Now time to go back and revisit. Right, to go back and rework things. And as most of you know, Mercury retrogrades are a good time to just be flexible. So October 13th, November 4th, good to be flexible with the routines, with maybe going back, reflecting on some things that we can restructure with our day-to-day activities, with our habits, right? And with our work as well. Good to go back and experiment. It's good to take action during a retrograde, just have a plan A, B, C, and D, because things do change, and they can change quite a bit with the routine side of things when Mercury is retrograde in Virgo. Although he does like to be here, and it's considered to be a little bit of an easier place for Mercury to go retrograde, still good to have that flexibility. All right, so that's the most important stuff there in October in the context of the T-square, the retrograde, and this little potential here since February 20th to be inspired towards some ideals of some kind. All right, so now looking at November, which is a bit more active, and of course in the US, for those of you in the US, we have the election on November 3rd. So notice that Mercury is going to go direct around November 4th. So that's going to be perhaps, some things now starting to move forward that we were starting to reflect upon or rework during the second half of October. So that's where we do have a lot more forward-moving energy, especially once we get to November 14th, once Mars goes direct, but a little bit more of this implementation. And if there were some things that you've gone back and redone during the retrograde, could be good to start to move forward. Now with this, also on November 5th, the sun will be going into Libra. So there's definitely a lot shifting around this 3rd through the 5th time period. It has to do with Mercury, again, going direct, implementation, but also the sun starting to leave Virgo and go into Libra. So the focus will shift a little bit more in terms of matters relating to justice and doing the right thing in our life. We'll probably be more focused in terms of what's right, in terms of relationships, maybe doing things that we can come to middle agreement with our partnerships and relationships, right, to find common ground and to really see two sides of the same coin, the two sides of a coin, right? Because there's always polarities in life, and Libra helps us see both polarities and how to walk a little bit more of a centered, balanced approach moving forward. This will be until November 23rd with the sun here. All right, but we'll still have that Virgo energy of improvement and refinement with Mercury still here and Venus still here as well. Now, perhaps one of the most important things is mid-November. So, definitely the most important part of the month. So November 12th, we have the last Jupiter over Pluto. And this is all about expanding, right? Jupiter expands and Pluto's the deeper realm. So it's expanding the deeper realms, hidden fears, hidden things we've locked away, things that we can now feel a little bit more inspired to face fears with, right? Jupiter being a benefic can help us see the more optimistic or bigger picture perspective of things that we may normally be afraid of and how to move into that fear, right? And do those things in the face of fears, which can be very transformative and very empowering. So this is the final contact. This energy has been starting or has started since April 4th of 2020. So if you want to think back to April 4th, was there anything that maybe you started to feel a bit open-minded about empowering yourself with, maybe unearthing or bringing to the surface that you can initiate or move forward in some way, right? This could be a completion of this deeper energy that Jupiter's helping us see the bigger picture side of and the lighter side of. All right, and then November 14th, again, mid-November, very important, Mars is going to finally go direct. And so although he'll still be in Pisces all the way until January 12th, there's a little bit more forward-moving energy with our motivation and drives. and maybe starting to implement some of these things we were reflecting on during the retrograde that had to do with what was important to us on a soul and spiritual level. So again, to find that balance between the work and rest and maybe getting some spiritual time, meditative time, things like this, starting to implement, right? Because Mars in Pisces, again, is about taking that more receptive action, right? A little bit more behind the scenes, a little bit more watery. Sometimes inaction is the best action, right? Sometimes going with the flow is a little bit easier than fighting things. And so I think we've kind of shifted this perspective and learned these kinds of lessons slowly as we get into late November, of now implementing things that could be a lot easier to be willing to go with the flow and just more willing to work with uncertainty with things, but still, of course, good to have that receptive approach throughout the process. All right, and then November 23rd, the sun will go into deep Scorpio. You know, these things with the sun are very cyclical. They happen every year, but I think it's good to know about it. So from November 23rd until December 7th, it will be good to focus on the deeper aspects of life. How can we maybe do some things that involve bringing things to the surface, both internally, which could be great for empowerment, just like that Pluto energy, but also externally as well. Just a good time for matters of maybe research, uncovering hidden things, expressing our truth or the truth, and then perhaps more of the healing energy when we get to December, which we'll talk about. All right, and then we do have a partial lunar eclipse at the very end of November on November 30th, which will be in Taurus. And so this will all be about finding this balance between how can we connect to, again, the deeper side of life and our deeper values, but at the same time, you know, see that we can relax into things like nature and abundance and resources of life. So it'll be a great time to, you know, really see how can we cultivate a little bit more of the beauty and aesthetics and comforts in our life, like nature and abundance, even, you know, material life, right? Abundance around us. And that's going to help us, you know, do some of this deeper energy because we'll be able to balance it with more of the grounded energy. It's also a great time to find balance between interdependency in our life and self-reliance. That could be another theme, which we'll talk about once we get to that update. But this could also start to finalize things that we started to experience back since June 21st, because that's when we had the last solar eclipse. And with the eclipse cycles, this is all about things completing over 6-month periods with the solar cycle. So anything from June 21st could come to a head, could come to a completion around this November 30th time period. And this is also about the time that Neptune does go station direct. And so this will be, again, the last transit of Aquarius, now implementing final lessons, let's say, around more receptivity about collective matters, right? We probably are going to be more willing to do that, and maybe starting to get some intuition or clarity about the future just in general. Of course, it'll still be watery, it'll still be Neptune. There won't be that clarity until probably, full clarity until March, but definitely a more willingness to be receptive to collective matters. So definitely things easing up there is what it looks like. All right, and then December. So December, another very important month of the year. So on December 7th, the sun will go into healing Ophiuchus, which will be great for healing, really just in general. And that's going to be great. Let's see. Actually, I don't have so this will be great all the way until December 20th. All right, so from December 7th to December 20th, good for this healing energy, especially because we are going to have a total solar eclipse in Ophiuchus, the healing constellation, on December 14th. So around this middle part of December, it's really good to turn inward. All eclipse times are very spiritual times. And to see if any wounds or deep things do arise that we can simply just become more conscious of and maybe start to work with going into the new year. So it's all about healing. This could be personally, of course, psychology, spirituality, maybe physical healing as well could be good, but even collectively as well, right? Maybe starting to implement some more healing kind of energy or medical kind of energy collectively, we might notice as an aside to that. All right, so, and this also prompts new beginnings. There's a lot of new beginnings starting this December 14th with the eclipse because it's like a new moon. And going into the new year, while doing this healing, we'll slowly probably start to feel a little bit more rejuvenated, a little bit more redeemed, a little bit more healed going into the new year as the rest of December unfolds. All right, and then December 20th, the Sun and Mercury will be going into more free-spirited Sagittarius. So that's great for really reflecting on how much our perception has changed, because at the very end of the year, Saturn and Jupiter, while they conjoin, are going to leave Sagittarius. And that means the final developments of all this whole shift of our perspective, both personally and collectively. It could mean a finalization of anything you have been building towards that has been an inspiration, maybe as far back as the past 3 years since Saturn's been here. But to give a more shorter term analysis, this year, all of this changing to our beliefs, to our perspectives, and all this rebuilding and restructuring we've been doing could be finalized, at least in some larger sense, once Saturn and Jupiter leave, which will be around their conjunction on December 21st. So as the Sun goes into Sag, getting into some of that free-spirited energy, open-mindedness, adventurousness, and finalizing and completing any work we've been doing and restructuring since the beginning of the year. All right, and then so their conjunction, Jupiter and Saturn, will be on December 21st. And so this is all about a new beginning as well. Conjunctions are like new moons, especially with Saturn and Jupiter, who are polarities. Saturn's contraction, Jupiter's expansion. And so when they get together, it can be very powerful for manifestation. So there's likely new inspirations coming in going into 2021. But there's also this more willingness probably to put in work and time and patience into things and to build these things that have been restructured, going in, or just to further develop them going into 2021, especially because they're going to be both going into Capricorn. And so especially with Jupiter and Capricorn, this is about seeing potentials, but really needing to put in the time and the work and the discipline to put them into fruition. And I think it can be a very constructive next couple years, with Jupiter next year, but Saturn there for the next 2.5 years, really building upon this more long-term perspective. Things that require time, things that require discipline, patience, and perseverance can make it a very, very constructive next few years, let's say. All right, everyone. So that is the 3 months in a nutshell, looking at the bigger picture as well. Again, new energy coming into the year. You can see all the conjunctions, the eclipse, new sign changes with Jupiter and Saturn going into Capricorn. Mars will leave Pisces January 10th. January 11th, let's say, 11th, 12th, Mars will start to go into a much more comfortable placement, which is great for action and initiative. And then, like I said, in March, Neptune will go into its home sign of Pisces, leaving future-oriented Aquarius, lifting up any type of uncertainty or watery energy about collective matters in the future, and starting to go into an area that's more about what's important to us spiritually, that we could be more receptive about. Be a very strong time for ideals, dreams, inspirations that we can be more receptive about, but at the same time just connect to spiritually. All right, so everyone, have a fantastic 3 months, of course. Have an awesome rest of your day. Thank you again for all of your support. If you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to click that like button, and I will see you all in the next MTZ Insiders Update. Take care.